I'm just wearing a t-shirt, but I've got to take this thing
Uh-huh,
off.
go ahead.
I
You
am-
could go in the bathroom if you feel so.
No, just comes right off.
Okay.
I do have a shirt on.
Have you family here in Cherry Hill?
No.
You have children?
I've got my kid, my wife, and my kids.
Yeah, okay. How old are your children?
My oldest is, what is he now? I'm embarrassed that I don't know it right off the top of my head.
Is he in high school?
No. He's
Yeah.
30 now, I think. Or 29.
Oh, okay.
He's 29.
Okay, is he a college graduate?
Yeah, he was in the Air Force, and then he
Okay.
went to Rutgers when he
Oh,
got out of the
okay.
Air Force.
Okay,
So he lives local.
okay.
And then I've got two others. I've got a son and a daughter, and they're also out of school.
Uh-huh.
And
Did they go to nearby colleges?
my daughter
I
went
went
to Penn
to
State.
Water?
Sure.
Water? Okay.
My daughter graduated from Penn State,
Uh-huh.
and
So how'd you get to Penn State? Are you Philadelphian?
my father is Philadelphian, and he went to Penn State.
Uh-huh.
People could just apply, Mom.
Yeah, I know, but
And
usually
I started at
Pennsylvania
Penn State.
people go to Penn State.
No. Yeah.
Yeah. What
Yeah,
was
they
your
have to
father's
have
name?
Charles.
Charles
His
Gilbert?
last name happened to be Goldberg.
Oh, I'm a
Okay.
Goldberg.
And,
Charles Goldberg.
He changed it in 1955.
Okay, I just wondered whether I knew him or not. I'm a Philadelphian.
He was West Philly. Went to West Philly High, class of
No,
30.
but I went to Temple.
He went to Penn State.
Yeah.
He had some Temple friends. I think Reds Klotz, who was a basketball player, went
No,
to.
no. Now, this is me when I was in the service.
Show the camera.
Yeah, well, now
gonna
do you
move
want
over.
before I was in the service or just during the service?
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's start off. Just tell us your name,
Yeah.
anything.
Is this video?
This is video. It's
Okay.
on.
All right.
Okay.
Um,
You're being
And-
videotaped.
and
Yeah,
then
okay.
start off and tell us about your life before the
Oh,
service.
well, that's what I'm talking about. I don't know exactly what you had wanted to do as far as the background is concerned.
Whatever you'd like to
Okay.
tell us.
All right. All right.
And
You have the rest of the day?
I figure
I have a lot of years.
people are going to want to watch this. So
Uh-huh.
figuring maybe anywhere from half an hour to an hour.
Oh, my.
Um,
I couldn't talk that long. No, I can't talk.
So, it's what you think is relevant and
Yeah.
what you think is
Okay,
important.
now, I could talk about myself, but I could also talk about my husband, who was 3.5 years in the Navy during World War II.
We'll take them both.
And we have a lovely family. And I have a grandson that was affected by this closeout with our government, and he did not have a job to go to until yesterday.
Okay, let's
Yeah.
talk
So
about
I'm
your
just saying-
life
Yeah.
and
okay.
then your time in the service, and
Okay.
then how about then meeting Daddy and
Okay.
then Daddy's
All right.
time, okay?
Now, I have to say that I have, yeah. Okay. This is what I wrote a couple days ago, because I went to Washington, and we
Protested.
went with some of the gentlemen from my veterans group, and we protested to the people, the legislators, and this is what I said to them. Okay? I'd like to introduce myself. My name is May Brill. I am a mother of 4 daughters. I have 9 grandchildren, 1 great-granddaughter, and 1 great-grandson on the way. I am a very active woman as vice president of a singles club at the Jewish Community Center. I am on the board of associates of Fox Chase Cancer Center in Philadelphia. and I volunteer at the Catch Jewish Community Center every day that I'm there. What might what you might not know, that I am a World War II veteran. Yes, I was in the Navy, the Waves, which was women's auxiliary. What was this? No. I was in the Navy, the Waves, for 2 years. That's Women's Auxiliary Volunteer Emergency Service. That's what WAVE stood for. My husband was in the Navy for 3.5 years during World War II. I am now Senior Vice Commander of Jewish War Veterans Post 126. We work very hard helping the men and women fighting in our military, and the men and women that are veterans, that are coming home as veterans and are veterans long term. Would you believe that there are street people that are last veterans, women and men, but men and women? That means women walk the streets without houses and families and everything. Women fought for our country from the beginning of our country. They used to wear men's clothes because a woman was not accepted in the military. But later in the Revolutionary War, Molly Pitcher was standing beside her husband at his cannon, and he collapsed, and she took over. She was the first actual woman that was not disguised as a man that fought for our country. And since then, women have come out to fight for our country in any way. Now, I was on the auxiliary of the Navy. That meant I was not part of the Navy. It was a volunteer program, and the women that were WACs were volunteer program. It wasn't until later on in the 40s that the presidents at that time had the Women Army Corps part of the Army, and the women in the Navy part of the Navy. So actually, that changed a lot of women's rights and what they are entitled to. So as I said before, women were in the service in our country for many years. Now, I myself, during World War II, my brothers were in the service. One was in the Coast Guard and the other one was in the Army. And I said, what about me? I'm very patriotic and I want to take care of my country and support it. So I was sworn in on my 20th birthday, and I served 2 years. What happened at that time, as I said, women did not go overseas, only in the medical corps. And therefore I was part of the supply corps. And when I enrolled in the service, I was sent to Hunter College for my basic training. The government took over colleges at that time to use for the war effort. And Hunter College was basic training for the women. And they had basic training where we learned all the things that the men did in their basic training. We went through drills, we learned about the recognizing airplanes, recognizing ships, and all the things that the men, we drilled, we stood watch, we did all these things that the men did. But I had never been outside of Pennsylvania. I lived in Philadelphia for many years, and I had never been outside of Pennsylvania except to go to Atlantic City. Well, they told me that I would go to a nearby place near Pennsylvania, but it ended up. After my basic training, we had to have storekeeping training, that's supply corps. And I was sent to Milledgeville, Georgia State College for Women. And Milledgeville, Georgia is a little town. It actually was the first capital of Georgia many, many years ago. And this little town had this college, and we were taught all the things about the supply corps. In the weekends, the farmers used to come in their horse and buggies with their families and to buy things and to eat watermelon walking on the streets And they didn't even know what a northern person looked like. We were the Yankees. And one man, actually, who was in charge of the graves in that area, said, we even put a flag on the Yankee graves. So they wanted to show that they were not prejudiced. But afterward, they told me that I would be going to Milledgeville, to Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, and work there in the Supply Corps. The day I was supposed to leave, they said, no, you're not going to Mechanicsburg. You're going to Oakland, California. Well, this was quite a surprise. And I got on a train. This train was fueled by coal. And they sat us up for 5 days and 5 nights, sitting up, sleeping, sitting up. And they used to stop at different places and pick up food. So there was no dining car, there was no sleeping car. This was just a sit-up train. Well, the soot was all over you because of the coal. We got to California in 5 days and 5 nights.
Do you remember
And-
what date or even what year?
This was 1944. And what happened was this Oakland, California base was they put the barracks right in the middle of the town, right surrounded by houses. And we stayed there. Again, the women did all the things that the men did as far as the work was concerned. We were on a base, we had our training, we had to actually do the work, but we stood watch, we did all the kinds of maneuvering that we had to do. Now, our object of our service was to supply the Pacific Fleet. The Pacific Fleet was out during the war, doing all these things that they had to do, but they needed all these supplies. Some of them never even came to port. We used to have to bring it to them out on the waters. And we also supplied the Pacific bases that they started to put together. And as the time went by, I started as a seaman 3rd class, and I ranged 5 levels before I was discharged, and I was storekeeper 2nd class, which is 5 levels up from the beginning. And as I said, we had to do all the things that the men did on their bases, and plus we had to get the supplies together and keep records together. And I have here all the different things, pictures of what we have done. And also, let me say, when I got into the service when I was 20 years old. Now, Oakland is right across the bay from San Francisco. So we did have some free time, and we went to San Francisco as often as we had some free time. And I celebrated my 21st birthday at Top of the Mark in San Francisco with friends, and I had my first legal drink there at Top of the Mark in San Francisco. So after 2 years, 1 year I came home. That was after over a year, I came home on leave. That meant they gave you like a week or 10 days leave. And this time I came home on a train. It was an electric train, and it took 3 days to get home instead of 5 days. And it was clean. You had a sleeping car, you had a dining car, and all the amenities of today's transportation. So I came home and I spent time with my family and friends. But something at the time that I was discharged happened. When I went into the service, my friends had a little party, a farewell party, and they invited a young man who was in the Navy. And he couldn't come because he was still busy doing whatever he was doing and could not get leave. When I came home after the service, women and men were entitled to going to college for the time that they spent in the service. So I went to Temple, and I was standing in line the first day, and there was a girl in front of me who had been in the WACs. That was the Women's Army Corps. And we became friends. And as I said, I was Jewish, and so was she. So we became really friends, and she said, I have a boyfriend, and he has a boyfriend. Would you like to meet him? And that gentleman was the boy that didn't come to my party 2.5 years before. And of course, we got married, and we were married 39 years before he died of cancer. And I have, as I said, I have 4 daughters. This is my youngest. And I have 9 grandchildren, and I have a great-grandchild. So actually, what I told you at the beginning, why I was so active, was all because I had been in the service, and we in our in our veterans group have helped so many people that were in the service or the troops that are in the service. And our Jewish War Veterans 126 post have helped to put a day room in Fort Dix McGuire, which was very much needed. We also had 9 years of helping the troops celebrate Thanksgiving. Buses would come to the Palace of Asia, which is in Cherry Hill on Route 70, and the troops did not know where they were going. And we had all these volunteers standing in the driveway with flags welcoming them. And we gave them Thanksgiving dinner. And we also gave them bags of things that they could use. And this is what we have done for the troops. Now for the veterans, I am in charge of the Vineland Memorial Home, which is a nursing home for 300 veterans or their families. And we go there periodically and give them all kinds of things. We help them by doing things that they have a wish list, so we raise money to buy things that they need. We just recently gave them 2 8-foot grills that they could have barbecues on. We gave them a curtain for their stage. We have gone there and taken them to the River Shark games. The River Shark games are the baseball games in Camden, and we sit beside them and we help them with whatever they need. If they have to go to the restroom or they have to buy something to eat, we're there for them. We also go to Vineland and have a bingo game periodically, or we have a barbecue. And this brings the people out of their rooms and gives them something to do. Periodically, we buy clothing for them. We usually bought them suits, sweatsuits. And my job this year, because I am now chairman of Women in the Military for all of New Jersey, so I think of women, how important it is for them to be recognized. So we are going to give them sweatsuits in different colors and different sizes, so they would look as though they fit, because sometimes they're so big. People also, they ask for all kinds of toiletries. Women, men didn't use toiletries that women use, so we're going to recognize that their needs are important. Now, just this past week, 5 men and I went down to Washington to the World War II Memorial to protest the government closure. And believe it or not, there were people from all over United States, veterans, that say, we need the government to recognize that we have needs. They had pensions that were not paid. They had hospital costs that were not covered. They had children of the Army or even of the troops that were not getting their monies, so they didn't have money to live on. Many of the families are not working because jobs are hard to get, and they work near in fact, we have people living here in my building where I live that are military. And I see them all the time. The children and the mothers really need help with food, clothing, and shelter too, because some of them are losing their homes because they can't pay for their mortgage. So these are the things that we're concerned about. Now, there's another thing, that women as well as men, veterans, are street people. And we go to the stand down at the armory and help with these people that are street people. You know what street people is? They don't have any family connection. They don't have any place to sleep. They don't have any place to eat. So we help with the food and the clothing, but we also help them fill out forms, because a lot of them are not able to fill out forms that they need for the VA. And believe it or not, we have a lot of people who are suicidal, and that we recognize this. When you call the VA, do you know they have a suicide hotline that you could call? Well, they do. They do. And I have a daughter who works at Dover Hospital in Delaware, and right across the street from them is the Dover Air Force Base. They actually send people over, troops over, that are suicidal, men and women, because women really in the service have their own problems. And
Sure.
I, as chairman of Women in the Military for all of New Jersey, have found that there is a lot of problems that women in the service and women veterans have faced. A lot of it has to do with sexual approaches, and some of them have been raped. And all this is while they were in the service. There have been hush-hush over the years, and recently it has come out that they are doing something about it. I, as chairman of Women in the Military, are trying to bring this to a head and to see that they get help. Also, I go around talking to groups and telling them about the history of women in the military, and also to tell them that the need for women in the military is so strong. So all I can do is celebrate my 90th birthday with the idea that I'm doing a good job. And I hope that there are people around that will be assisting us in any way that they can. We need volunteers.
It sounds like you're doing a great job. Can I back you up
Yeah,
to
sure.
your warriors a little bit?
Yeah.
And get a little bit more detail as to what your job was on a day-to-day
Okay.
basis out in Oakland?
Okay, all right. Now, when we get up in the morning, we have all kinds of duties, because we have requisitions of things that they need, and you have to contact the different suppliers of the materials. And we also have to look at the different warehouses and see what we have and what we don't have. And these are very important. And as far as the size of the packages, whether they need a truck to take it to the ships, or do they have to take it with an airplane that will come onto the water and supply them. We also have to look at their medical needs. We know that there are people that are on the ships that need certain things, because the doctors have, we even fly doctors out to the ships because of their medical needs. My husband happened to be on a cruiser, and he was on this cruiser that went where the Hornet was hit by a kamikaze pilot, and they took the people that were left off the ships and helped them. One of our veterans in my veterans group actually said, "I can't believe it. My ship was right across the ships from your husband's ship, and we were following his ship all during the war." And I never would realize that how important it was, what they did in all the maneuvers, all the battles that in the Pacific. As I said, my husband was in 3.5 years, and they were in netting battles, and also when the war was over, they went to Japan, and they were actually in Japan at the time when the war was over. And he was on a train, and this Japanese officer stood up and said, "We lost this war, but we'll do what better on the next one." And that quotation stayed in my mind. And when we were asked just last week about what bothered you about being an older person, what gives you a lot of concern, and I said, my husband and I went through World War II. We have been in many, many wars since then. And my problem is, my grandchildren and great-grandchildren, are they going to still be living in a war area, or are they going to have some peace? And that's my answer to this question. I worry, will there still be wars that we will be in the future? Why can't we have peace in this world? You know, I talk to all these people that have children. Are you going to raise your children, grandchildren, to be able to have peace in this world? Maybe one of them will be our president. Will they go into different countries and make war? Aren't we tired of war? You know,
It's
you
tough.
as a person,
It's a tough answer to
as
give
a
you.
student, you as a student, you have children. Would you want them to still grow up and still have war over their head?
Absolutely not.
Well, see, this is what I fight for women, but I also, would you believe because of there are not any jobs around for women, that there are going to be an increase in number of women in the military? The head of our National Jewish War Veterans came out with percentages. There will be 35% women in the military in the future. 35% is a lot of women. They don't have jobs. The military has a place for them where they can get a salary, and where they can get housing, and many of our young boys, same way. But do we have to have them in the military? Do we need to have fights? Do we have to have wars? No. Let them be our presidents. Let them be our senators. Let them see that we have to fight to keep our peace. That's my message.
So is there anything else about your warriors that you want to...
Oh, what? Well,
You want to tell us?
then I would, well, if you really want to know, as a Jewish person, would you answer that in the kitchen, please? As a Jewish person, when we went out, well, first of all, when I came out, when I went into the service, my friend said, what would a Jewish young girl want to do going into the service? That was the question. And I said, because I was patriotic, and it's my country, and I wanted to protect it as well. The second thing is, when we went out to California, there were 9 Jewish girls in 400. 9 Jewish girls, and believe it or not, some of them had never seen a Jewish person. They lived in the Midwest, and they had never met a Jewish person. And at that time, people didn't move around a lot, so that, you know, times were different. That's 1944. That's a lot. And but they really can say that they liked me, I liked them, I was not prejudiced for them. And what I do here, I try to volunteer and give back. Everybody has to, whatever they have to be thankful for what they have, and they have to give back. I have all these things to show that I have been active in volunteering in different things. I was given an award of 25 years in Girl Scouting. Having 4 daughters, they can't get into a Girl Scout troop unless there's a leader. So, of course, I was the leader. So as they went up, 25 years of Girl Scouting, Rabbi Lewis got the award for 25 years in Boy Scouting, and I was right beside him. I was very proud to say that I was helping these young girls. Later on, I met one girl, and she became an adult, and I said, "Gee, it's good to see you. You were in my Girl Scout troop." And she said, "Yes." And I said, "What did you get out of Girl Scouting?" She said, "I learned to be a mom," because they did not have home economics. They didn't have a shop for the boys anymore. And we taught them how to cook and sew, and even with a doll, how to wash a baby. And she said, all this was my background of growing up. And I was very proud to have done that. 25 years in Girl Scouting.
You did a lot
My
of
daughter
volunteer
went
work.
to the Girl Scout headquarters, and she actually was proud to be part of the Juliet Lowe
I went to
place.
Savannah.
Yeah, in Savannah,
Last year it was
Georgia.
the 100th year of Girl Scouting. It's very exciting
Yeah.
to me.
Of course.
You went through the Girl Scouts?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, none of my kids went through scouting.
Well-
I went through Cub Scouts and a little bit of Boy
I
Scouts.
was going to be, there wasn't Girl Scout troop in my daughter's school. And I looked into and researched to start one, and I would be the leader, but I realized she was such a rotten kid. She would never listen to me, and I was doing it all for her, and she wouldn't appreciate it, so I didn't do it.
But all I could say is, being part of the Jewish War Veterans, Post 126, has given so many people such a wonderful, wonderful feeling that people care. People have to care about people. And of course, when we go to the stand down, which is for the street people. People in that position don't realize that people care about them. When we go to Fort Dix, McGuire, those troops that are coming back, some of them are really hurt, that they don't realize that people care about them. When we have the Thanksgiving dinner for these troops, 5 busloads, they didn't realize that people care about them. We get letters of families. My troop person didn't have any place to go. Thank you for giving them Thanksgiving. You know, these things you don't realize, that the troops are remembered and the veterans are remembered and the street people who have problems are remembered. I go to Vineland Memorial Home. They have 300 beds of veterans or veterans' families that are there all the time. And they don't realize that people care about them until we're there for them. And it's amazing how many people need help and other people sit back, watch television, or do nothing. I started a baby hat group. I went to camp. There's a senior adult camp in Poconos, and I've been going to camp for 13 years. And my children said, my mom goes to sleepaway camp. Oh, it's true. And at that camp, they had a community service program where you knit baby hats. Well, one of the presidents has said, a baby hat saves babies' lives. So I came back to Cherry Hill, and I said, I'll start this here at the community center. We've made 5,000 baby hats already. That means 5,000 babies that are not going to be sick in the newborn part of the hospital. And we send them to Israel, and because of other countries, but because of the cost of shipping, we have declined our sending overseas. But people that go on trips to Israel, I said, how about if you take a package in your suitcase? And I have a contact there, and believe it or not, Hadassah Hospital gives the baby hats to the Bedouins, to the Arabs, to the Jewish children, to anyone that is in need of a baby hat. There's no discrimination as far as little babies are concerned. and I am proud they call me the baby hat lady. But we've sent 5,000 baby hats, and now the Jewish war veterans are going to Israel, and they're taking packages right in their suitcases along with the baby hats.
So you're still sort of doing the same thing that you did in the war,
Giving,
Supplying.
is supplying.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But as I said, there's always ways of doing things and helping people. And you know what? Maybe that's what's keeping me alive, because I get up in the morning and I have a place to go and something to do. And I do exercise.
She's busy
Monday,
lady.
Wednesday,
I
and
hear-
Friday,
I
I go
hear
to
that.
exercise at the community center. And we also exercise our mind. I play canasta, I play mahjong.
No bridge.
No bridge, no bridge. Why don't you tell them about your family life when you were growing up? How many your mother? How many children
Okay.
you had? Was
Okay.
grown?
I'm a family of 7 children.
Wow.
Yeah, I lived in South Philadelphia. I was born in 1924.
Where in
which
South
is,
Philadelphia?
Yeah, I
What-
was
what
born.
area?
I was raised in South Philadelphia at 4th and Ritter, and we moved. We moved to about 10 different places in South Philadelphia, and we used to go, believe it or not, in all the places that didn't cost money. My mother found places all over that didn't cost money. We went on so many different picnics where everybody would climb into the one car because the families all shared one car. That was my aunts and uncles with their children. They would sit 3 in a seat. They didn't have seat belts in those days. And when we got to the park for our picnic, when we got out of the car, the springs jumped up because they were down so far. Now, about 5 months before, 5 months ago, I read an article about a place in Red Bank, New Jersey, and that is Cooper Campbell Soup has a amusement park for children. Okay, when I was little, that's where we went. It was called Soupy Island. And there was a big article in the newspaper about it. I said, I didn't know that they still had it. It was free. You got on the trolley car and you went down to the ferry boats. Well, we were 7 children. Would you believe at that time, the conductor used to get off the trolley car and help you take a carriage along with the baby carriage. And the poles were certain height, and if you were shorter than that, you got on free. Well, the 7 of us were pretty short at the time, and then we would go on the trolley car and down to the ferry boat. The ferry boat was free too. So we would go to Red Bank and we'd go to this Soupy Island, and they would give you a container of milk and a roll and a Campbell soup. That's what they gave you to eat. And then they had all these amusements. Well, you know, that was the most wonderful thing that you could ever
I'll bet.
go to amusement park. So that was one of our things.
So where were your parents from originally?
My mother and father were from Russia. Now, my grandmother, she was from Iran, and they was called Prussia at that time. And they came around and they went into Russia and the Black Sea, or in that area. My grandmother was a very, very important person because what she did for her family, she married a fellow who's her mother and father matched her up with. And he was a person that studied all the time. They called them yeshiva bucher. And at that time, so her father gave her a shoe store. And she would take care of the business, and her husband would study all the time. Well, one day, she went to pay a bill at a factory of shoes. And she saw all these shoes outside. And she said, "What's these shoes for?" He said, "They are shoes that are no longer able to use because there's something the matter with them." She said, "Could you sell them?" He said, "You could have them." So anyhow, she had people from her town come in a horse and wagon and take these shoes, put them on, and go back to her home. And she had people fixing the shoes, and she became the first reject shoe store. And she sold shoes that were really fixed up, and she made money. But she also sang, and she had the most beautiful voice, and everybody just came and sat and listened to her sing. Most of the things that happened, she came to United States, and that was during the flu epidemic. Flu epidemic.
18?
Yeah, and unfortunately, many of the people passed away from flu epidemic. Now, my mother's family, this was my father's family, my mother's family, a man knocked at her door and asked for a certain family, and she said, "Who are you?" And he said, "I'm a doctor." So she says, "Come on in," and he saved her whole family from the flu because of knocking on the wrong door. You know, these things do happen. Just like fate made my husband, who was not in my farewell party, meet me 2.5 years later. And then I have these beautiful daughters and grandchildren.
Tell them about Daddy and Daddy in the service.
Okay. Let me tell you, my father was one of 12 children.
Your husband.
My husband was one of 12 children.
Also
He
from
was the
Philly?
11th
Yes.
of 12 children. And I have a thing here. He's the baby on there.
Family picture.
He's the baby on his father's lap. Now, my father, his father, my father-in-law, was in the produce business. And he had a produce store where on Saturday, he used to take all his produce that was in his store out on the sidewalk, and he had an auction for the neighbors. He would get rid of all his produce and then start again on Monday. But people in that area were poor people, and they really appreciated it. But he had 9 sons. Every time he had a son that grew up, he opened another fruit store in a different neighborhood.
So how many of the sons went into the service?
Yeah.
In the war?
They were 1, 2, 3 of them, because the others were too old. My husband was the youngest.
And he was in the
his
Navy?
brother was in the Army, and that's my husband in the Navy. And let me say, his brothers were in the produce business in a different way. You know where South Philadelphia Food Development Center is down in? Well, he went into business with his 2 brothers, and they had a box that had a big V on it, and that was Brill's garlic. And garlic was imported from all parts of the world. He also packaged red onions in bags of 3 pounds, and he also had little bags of all kinds of spices on a cardboard. And that was our business. And the reason we came to Cherry Hill, we lived in Levittown, Pennsylvania. Levittown, Pennsylvania was the first area that was built for veterans that came out of the service. And Levitt, that built Levittown, wanted people to have low-income housing. We paid $10,000 to have a ranch house. And to tell you the truth, that ranch house, we paid $10 for settlement. So it was $9,900 and $100 for the settlement. It
A lot of
cost
those
us
houses are
$10,000.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
we had a lot of people that lived in Levittown that we knew, that we had children. Walt Disney came to the dedication of the elementary school that we built.
It was called Walt
And
Disney
we called
Elementary
it
School.
Walt Disney Elementary School, and he gave us plaques of all his different characters for our auditorium, and each room was a different part of his name for one of his characters. And it was really nice. My oldest daughter was the first in that school in kindergarten, and she came back for the 50th anniversary. She has a friend that she met still her friend after 50 years. And both of them came to the dedication of the 50-year anniversary at Walt Disney School.
Great.
Talk
Yeah.
about Daddy being in the Navy.
Yeah, well, my husband, as I said, was in the Navy for 3.5 years. He was on a ship, and all I can say is, these are the things that I have here that are to be remembered with my husband and all the things that he had done. This is his brother, and his brother was in the Army and he was in the Navy. He was down on the bottom of the ship in charge of the compass. He was in charge of the compass that turned the ship, that also managed the guns. And that was his job. I have to tell you
Do you know
that
what-
a
what
torpedo
ship?
came into his room and did not explode. And I always said that's another thing that God was good to us, because he was meant to live and to be my husband.
What was the name of the ship?
I forgot.
Where's the book?
Sharon has it,
Ugh.
yeah. Now,
But he saw a lot of action.
oh, he
Yeah.
saw a lot of action. He was in 10 different battles of different things that they had. Also, after the war, he was in Japan for a while. 3.5 years is a long time. 3.5 years is a long time.
You bet.
And,
Especially during a war.
yeah, during the war,
He never talked about it though.
yeah.
He
No,
never
he-
talked.
yeah.
She didn't belong to the war veterans until about 10 years ago,
Yeah, after he died,
after my father passed away.
Yeah.
He would never really talk about the war.
yeah.
And-
Now,
and-
A
another
lot of
thing,
veterans
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why, but
okay. Another thing
There's a lot
that
went on.
happened, I had a younger brother, the one that was in the Army. He had cancer, and he passed away. And then my husband had cancer and passed away. And I felt that there were people that needed help. And I started to get active in the Fox Chase Cancer Center in Philadelphia. We have a group. We started out to be 100 members, and we made $10,000 toward cancer research. Today, we are 262 members, and we gave $140,000 for cancer research. But $100,000 we gave to put a van that has a mammogram unit on it to go to poor neighborhoods. I am on the Board of Associates at Fox Chase Cancer Center for 26 years. They keep re-electing me because you have to be elected by the executive board.
well,
And
you're a worker. You're a worker. They want
yeah,
it.
all I could say is I am proud to say that I have little stickers that I give out that says, research cures cancer. And that's how I feel. I feel the more money that is raised for research, the better it will be. My husband died of prostate cancer 20 years ago,
30 years ago.
1985.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just saying that my husband died of prostate cancer. Men are walking around for years that have prostate cancer
And my father
because
died of
research has
prostate
helped.
cancer.
Right.
Yeah.
Now they wouldn't have.
Yeah. Now, Fox Chase Cancer Center has an 18-story building that is for prevention of breast cancer for women. Do you know men can get breast cancer? Because I know men that did.
I guess so.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm just saying that these are things that I try to do. I try to give back to people who need and to educate. I didn't tell you about my position where I worked. I didn't tell you that I was assistant administrator of York House, which was a for older people apartment complex in Philadelphia. It was part of the Philadelphia Geriatric Center. The Philadelphia Geriatric Center in Philadelphia was on Old York Road and Tabor. And when I graduated college, and that was another thing. When I went to college for 2 years at Temple, that was all that I had. But when she was 6 years old, and my husband said, "You always wanted to go back to college, why don't you go back?" And I said, "How can I? I have 4 daughters, I have a house, I have a husband. What do you want me to do?" He said, "Don't worry, go back." So I went to Camden County Community College, and I got an associate degree. Then he said, "Now you got to go further." So I went to Glassboro. At that time, now it's Rowan. I graduated Rowan and Glassboro at that time. I was 50 years old. And my mother was there, my children were there, my husband was there. I said, my husband should have gotten a degree. So actually, the first month that I had graduated, this gentleman who I had heard of and had not met before came to me, Maury Greenbaum, and he said, "I am the administrator of York House in Philadelphia. Would you like to be my assistant?" So I was assistant administrator of York House and the recreation director. So we had people with mom and pop stores. That were the people that were living there. While I was living,